This week we're going to talk about leadership in the church. Leadership means different things to different people. As a pastor, I personally look at leadership a little differently than, say, a CEO would do or a business person. What does leadership mean? I think people have a lot of different definitions, but if you think about it, a leader is a person that gets a group of people from where they are to where they can be, moving them from the present to their potential. Like Moses getting the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt into the land of promise. Or Jesus taking the 12 common ordinary men and his other followers. And eventually he changed them into world changers and launched the largest religion in the history of the world today. So a leader is a person that has a clear-cut vision, a mental picture of where they're going down the road in the future, and they're able to mobilize and motivate a group of people to follow them toward that destiny. So a leader without followers is a person going on a walk. And if people aren't following us, then we're not leading them. That's a very simple approach to leadership, but that really is what it's about. How do we build a leadership team of our staff, of volunteers in the church? How do we motivate people and inspire them to share our vision, to buy into that vision, so that the church and the ministry can grow from what it is today to what it has the capacity and the ability to be. So leaders are very visionary. They're always looking beyond the present to where things can go, where things need to go. And they're able to nurture people and encourage people and keep the team together. If you move too quick, you can fragment the team, you can lose people. Moving the church forward, moving a ministry forward is a very delicate thing because people tend to get very comfortable where they are. If the church is doing good, people are happy about that, and you say, well, we need to move on. Sometimes they don't understand that. They're thinking, well, things are great. But a leader understands that if things stay the way they are for too long, eventually they get stagnant. So there's a real delicate art to enjoying where we are in the moment and yet continuing to inspire people to see what's in front of us and to get them to follow us toward fulfilling that future. Good leadership always has a church moving forward. It's never stagnant. It's not going through major changes that disrupt, but it's always going through small, gradual improvements and refinements to become more of what it has the capacity to be. And that's what leaders see. They see where we're going, and they're able to motivate us and inspire us to follow them toward that goal. A big part of leadership is getting a team of people. So we have staff, we have paid employees, and then we have volunteers, which really forms most of the ministry. And one of the big responsibilities of those who are on the staff, who are privileged to devote their lives full-time to the ministry, is to help train and nurture and encourage the many, in our case, several thousand volunteers it takes to fulfill all the aspects of the ministry of the church. Now, there are four aspects to building a team, whether this is your staff, your pastoral team, whether it's your eldership, whether it's a leadership team in the church, a body of lay leaders. There are four steps to recruiting a team and building a team. The first is to recruit people. The second is to train them. The third is to release them into ministry, what's often called delegation. And the fourth, that in my observation, is always overlooked, and I've rarely seen anybody write about it, and that's to oversee what we delegated. How do we recruit people on our staff, on volunteers? You look for two things, their gift and their calling. Romans 11:29, the gifts and callings of God are irrevocable. A person's gift, look for the talent. Find people's talent and match it up with their job. When it comes to hiring people, hiring ministers, for example, or administrative people, or finance people, or people to care for the facility, you want to find the most talented people you can find. It's the number one quality to look for. People that are very talented at what they do. You don't want to be hiring people that you think, well, I can train them, I can teach them. No, you want to hire people in every area that knows more about that ministry than you know as a pastor. You don't want to be telling the children's minister or the family ministries pastor or the media minister or the worship leader. You don't want to be telling them how to do their ministry. You want them telling you what needs to be done. And that's where you've got to invest financially and take your time in recruiting the most talented people you can find. And that applies also to lay leadership. When it comes to a board of directors or a committee of leaders, you want to find the most talented people in that area of ministry, even from the volunteer standpoint, because they're going to bring a lot of wisdom and knowledge and experience and creativity to the team. Now, once we recruit the right people and we're comfortable with the people we have to always have ongoing training where we are training them in ministry, sharing our vision, our values. So you have to come up with your own structure of, how often you do staff meetings and retreats, how you do ongoing education. I have certain things that I like to do, just continuing education in the church, a particular message that I may teach on, or a brief video that I may send out to hundreds of leaders in the church, maybe 10 to 15 minutes to cover something. I don't do it all the time. I don't overwhelm people with it. That's something you don't want to do, is have constant meetings. Meetings should be brief, they should be very strategic, and they should be designed to help train people and inspire them in their ministry. The third thing then, if we feel like we have people that are quality people and we've trained them, they know what their job is, they have clear understanding, we're making sure that we're always training them spiritually in how to do their ministry and building the qualities of excellence. Then we release them in ministry, or we delegate that ministry to them. The Bible says in 1 Peter 4:10, each one of you should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. So there are many gifts, many forms of ministry, many callings that people have, many great ministries in the church. There comes a time that you and I, as leaders, as pastors, have to let them use their gift, not stand over them, not watch everything they do. I have ministers I've met that tell me they go to everything in the church. It doesn't matter if it's an adult ministry or the youth ministry, or it doesn't matter what they burn themselves out. They feel like they've got to always be there. But what I think sometimes they're doing, every time they show up at everything, they're giving the message to the people in charge that they really don't trust them to do it on their own. So leaders, once we train people, we've got to let them go, let them make decisions on their own. They don't have to run every decision by us. If we teach them the core values of the church and our expectations of them, then they'll make the right decisions. And everybody's going to make the wrong decision. And some decisions aren't right or wrong. Some decisions just work out or they don't work out. And I tell many people that work with me, they say, I made a big mistake then. I said, no, you didn't. You did what you thought was best. It's just like me. I quit doing that to myself. Every time I do something and it work out, I would just really, put myself down and get depressed about it, thinking that was stupid. Why did you do that? A lot of these decisions aren't right or wrong. We have to make so many decisions in ministry, and we try to do the best we can. And sometimes you don't know if something's going to work until you implement it. So it's not a failure. Learning to walk is not failure. Falling down to something is not failure. Failure to me is when you quit. So you've got to factor that in. The idea that everybody's got to do everything, everything's going to work out, all the decisions are going to work out, that's not life. That's not how life works. When we delegate, when we release people, we expect some things not to work out. And yes, sometimes we're going to make a mistake. Sometimes we don't listen. So when we sit down and instead of, berating people or get on them and say, what can we learn about that? I do that to myself. I used to just spend time criticizing myself and blaming myself. I would now say, well, what can I learn about that? What did I discover about that? And to try to grow through it and not go through it. So you've got to delegate. You've got to let the ministry go. You've got to let people grow. They've got to feel the freedom to make their own decisions in their areas of ministry and their departments. And most of this stuff they'll figure out on their own. I had a minister friend call me yesterday about, building programs and fundraising. And, I said, just listen, all you need to do is pray. You're a very gifted minister. Learn to listen to your own heart. And that, you don't need an expert to tell you everything in life. And most people that are experts, in my opinion, they're no smarter than you and me. You have the freedom to think for yourself, make decisions for yourself, and let the people that serve with you, let the other ministers, let them craft their own ministry, let them develop their own ministry. So that's what delegation means. The fourth part of the team, though, that in my opinion is overlooked, is oversight. So we delegate things, we give somebody something, but we never have them report back to us. Or we never evaluate, well, how are things going? So here's Here's a principle that I live by, that I teach all of our ministers and leaders at our church. You can't oversee what you don't see. So you have to physically walk around the church. You've got to go and observe things physically, see how they're working. Overseeing to make sure that the goals that we've set, and the plans and the ministry that we've delegated, to make sure that things are working and that we're getting the desired results. So leaders inspire people to follow them, but they do that by building a team, and then they share that ministry and that leadership with them. Classically illustrated in the life of Moses in Exodus 18, when his father-in-law taught him to stop trying to do everything for himself. He was burning himself out. He was stressing himself, and had him select capable leaders and then delegate that ministry to them. And he said, it'll make your load lighter, and the people themselves will be more satisfied. You see it in Jesus' ministry. Even though he's the sinless, omnipotent Son of God, he didn't try to do all of his ministry by himself. He selected the 12. We know that he had 70 other disciples. We know that he had a whole group of women that traveled with him that helped him in his ministry as well. And we see Jesus constantly delegating, so that in 4 years of ministry after he left this earth, he was able to keep that ministry in their hands, and look what we've done with it since, because we were properly trained. The third aspect of leadership that we want to think about, especially with this team, is how do we recruit people, how do we keep them focused, and how do we keep them? It's not healthy for a church to have constant turnover in pastoral staff. It's very disruptive. It's not healthy for a church to have constant turnover in the upper echelon of leadership, say in the eldership or the board of trustees, or say the media ministry has a lay team that works for them of volunteers, or the music ministry has a volunteer leader. Some movement of leadership is very good and very healthy that we have transition. But we don't want people, key people, coming and going, where they get hired, they get in place, and the next thing you know, a year later, 2 years later, all of a sudden they're gone. We're constantly having staff turnover. It's very important to build a healthy environment, a positive environment, and it's very important to build an environment where people, especially paid employees, where they want to come to work. And that's why I said talent is important, and then we have to compensate people well. If we don't at least pay market value or do better when we can with incentives, we're not going to be able to keep talented people. You know, you get what you pay for when it comes to the business side or the managerial side of a church and the personnel side of the church. People have to be taken care of. They have to have a positive work environment. They have to be praised. One of the most important aspects of research this is in strengths-based psychology. Strengths-based psychology that was developed originally by Dr. Don Clifton begins to help people see, well, what are their strengths, what are their talents, and always put people in a job that matches their talent. That's why I quoted Romans 11:29 earlier, that gifts and callings of God are irrevocable. Even you see this in God's economy, that your spiritual gift goes with your calling. You can take a very talented person and put them in the wrong job or give them things to do that they're not good at, and they'll be miserable. You can put people in a job and they don't even have the gifts and abilities for that, and so they end up being frustrated. So in strengths-based psychology, there is a model developed after tremendous amounts of research as to what creates a team of people, what creates an environment where employees want to stay, where they're happy, where they're nurtured, and lay volunteers as well. And what kind of team, what goes into building a team that produces the desired outcome? I mean, you think about it. We started with a vision statement, a mission statement. We set outcome goals. Have you ever noticed that many of the goals we set in the church, we never reach them? And a lot of that is because the team itself is not functioning at its greatest level. And that's because there's not the kind of environment that brings out the best in them. So strengths-based psychology doesn't focus on people's weaknesses. It says, what are their strengths? What are their talents? How can we nurture that, encourage that, and bring them out? So he has 12 questions. It's a great survey to give a staff, to give a team. Each one of these questions could be rated 1 to 5, like 1, I strongly disagree, 5, I strongly agree with that statement. If you look at the 12, they're so simple, and yet those 12 factors will help you see whether or not you have the kind of environment that can attract quality people and keep quality people. The first 6 of these questions, they've strategically put at the top because they look at these separate from the second category of 6. The way that people answer these 6 questions tells you whether or not your church, your ministry will reach the desired outcomes. And the first 6 cover these areas. Number 1, do I know what is expected of me? Do I have a clear job description? If people say, I know exactly what's expected of me, that is a quality of a very strong environment, and one in which they feel very comfortable because they're not confused in terms of what's been expected of them. The second question is, do I have the materials and the equipment necessary to do my job? So if we don't put the money in and provide the best materials we can, the state-of-the-art equipment, then people get frustrated because they have a passion, they have a desire, but we haven't given them the equipment they need. But if they feel like that we've invested in, they've got everything in their hands, it will make them really rise to the highest level and do their best. The third question is very insightful. Do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? Now, that's why there cannot be a gap between somebody's talent and their job description. You can't just force them in a job and say, somebody's got to get it done, because it'll frustrate them and the work will not be at the maximum level. Churches function at the maximum when you put the most talented people doing the thing they're the most talented of. And you have a staff person come to you with frustration, it's very important to go back to this and ask them, what do you want to do? What are you good at? And help make sure their job description is now fitting in with their talent base. Do I have the opportunity every day? And all of us have a few things in our jobs, that we're not the best at, but we can't have a lot of that. Do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? Those people will be focused, they'll be productive, and they'll stay with you. The fourth question is, over the last 7 days, has my supervisor or manager or someone in our organization, in our church, have they recognized me for a job well done? Have they praised me? Now, that's something personally that I try to go overboard, doing small things for people, sending them notes, calling them, taking them to lunch, saying you're doing a great job. Even if you have to work with them on, correcting something, say, hey, we need to change this. It's so important to, at the same time, be recognizing and praising people for their work. Those are the people that will stay focused and that will stay with us a long time. And we need it every week. It can't be right. You can't go quarterly and say, I'm going to tell everybody thank you. Praise and recognition is something that we need constantly. Mark Twain said I could live 2 months on a single compliment. Personally, I can't get that far that long. I need a lot of praise and recognition and encouragement, and I think that we all do. The fifth question is, does my manager or my supervisor care about me as a person? Now, in leadership, it's one thing to care about the job somebody's doing. It's another thing to care about them, their personal life, to encourage them, to make sure that you know who they are, what they're going through, where they feel like they're not just doing a job, especially in a church. That's the worst place that kind of feeling could ever take place. I'm just here doing a job. They feel like I'm a part of this church, part of the ministry. The people that work with me, that help me, they care about me as a person. We do things together. We go out to lunch together. We're not always talking about work. The sixth question is, do I have someone who encourages my development? Is my supervisor, my manager, are they encouraging my development? Are they helping me grow and expand and learn? So when it comes to building a team, we can recruit them and train them and delegate and, yes, oversee them. And a lot of people focus on those things, but they don't go deeper. They don't really know how to attract quality people, to keep quality people, and to keep them focused so that they produce the desired outcomes. And you can take the strengths-based model of those 12 questions, take your team through them, go back and privately evaluate them, and they'll show you what kind of climate you have, whether it's a productive, healthy climate that's going to encourage your people, they're going to stay together, they're really committed, they're really happy, and you're going to reach your goals, or whether or not you kind of have an organization right now where people are very frustrated. The last thing I want to tell you about leadership and about teams is no team is perfect. So that should set our hearts at ease here as pastors and leaders and people that head up whole departments in churches, because you have to hire employees and you have to bring in, volunteers from the church and manage all these people. And personnel is the most difficult part of the church, of taking care of people, of motivating people, of leading people, of training people. But no team is perfect. So you need to go ahead and accept that. A lot of people in ministry and a lot of pastors get very frustrated because everybody on their team is not, functioning at 100%. No team is perfect, and nobody functions at 100% all the time. And I'll leave you with the thought of thinking of the 12 apostles. Think of the team Jesus selected. Luke chapter 6, verse 12 and 13 says Jesus prayed all night before he selected the 12. That's the longest he ever prayed that we know of for anything. He prayed the longest about selecting the right leaders. He poured into them. And yet go back and read their story. At times where they don't believe him. At times they're fighting among themselves. I mean, you're talking about Jesus' leadership team. At the end, look at the failure. Peter ends up, because of his fear, ends up denying Jesus. Judas, because of his own self-interest, perhaps his political interest, we don't know what all motivated him. He ends up betraying Jesus and then ends up a tragedy. Now think about that. Jesus couldn't even train 12 people to be a perfect functioning team. And if I said, name all the 12 apostles, it may take you a little while to do that. If I said, name the 3 most important, you'd go, well, Peter, James, and John. You're right, we see their name more. They function at a higher level than the rest of them. So everybody on the team is not functioning at the same level. They don't all have the same gifts. And the reason I point this out is I had a minister friend that came to me one time, very frustrated with his elders. He had 12 elders. He was so upset with him. He said, not everybody's qualified to teach. Not everybody is doing the same amount of work. And he was about to lose it over this team that he thought was going to be perfect, until I said, let's take a minute and look at the leadership team of Jesus. Look at the problems he had in it. Look at the different levels of faith he had in it. Look at the different levels of leadership he had in it. And I said, if Jesus was comfortable loving and leading an imperfect team, then shouldn't you and I do the same? And do you and I think we can build a leadership team that's better than the leadership team Jesus had? So you've got to look at your leadership team, their strengths, their weaknesses. Sometimes people are going to fail. We're going to fall short, including us. We've got to love the people God gives us. Walk with them, not demand too much from them. Look how merciful and kind and patient Jesus was with that leadership team. If we do these things, we'll be able to inspire people. We'll be able to build a team that stays with us, that are focused, that are happy, and we'll be able to produce what God has called us to produce.